No hate, Apollo. You know I fuck with you.
I'm not saying that it entails it. I'm saying that it is evidence in favor of that position.
Why is it evidence in favor of veganism being false?
Because it can appeal to the consistency of God relaying accurate information, and so if he makes a moral claim that it's permissible to eat animals, then that'll more than likely be accurate information.
I don't believe he's made that moral claim it's permissible to eat animals. What's the evidence of that?
In the Quran? Oh yeah, these get like this.
No,
The
saying that it
recitation.
happened in the Quran is not evidence to me that God said it. It's evidence to me that somebody wrote that down in the Middle East at one point. They thought it was true.
All I mean by God is just specifically that the Islamic God is someone who conveys the information of this, which is going to be relayed by the person who is inspired by God, which is Prophet Muhammad.
By God, you mean the Islamic God? Isn't that kind of redundant?
Yeah,
then?
I'm referring to the Islamic God, not just any God
Really?
broadly.
So
Of
then
course.
the Christian God isn't God?
I don't say the Christian God to be God now.
Okay. You don't think it's the
Because
case
of
the
the worship,
Christian God
it doesn't
is
have the property of, it doesn't have the worth of being worshipped. So I don't take it to be the case that the Christian God is God.
You don't think it's the case that people who believe in Christian God believe in God are atheists?
I take it to be the case that those beings are those people who don't believe in the actual God. So what I mean by God, they don't believe in
Not
God.
the actual God. By just God
Mhm.
doesn't mean specifically just the God that's actualized. Somebody can say they're an atheist. That would just mean they don't believe in any God. Doesn't mean that they don't believe in Islam, obviously, right?
Yeah, but
So
what
somebody
I'm saying specifically in this
are
context,
Christians atheists?
what I'm saying specifically in this context, when I say that God commands X, and this would be more evidence for this being permissible, all I mean there by God is just Allah. So I'm talking specifically about the Islamic God, not just any God in particular.
Yeah, so I don't see why it's the case that somebody can't just believe God exists and that the Quran's a bunch of nonsense. Like, why can't somebody just hold these two views?
I think it is the case that if they believe that God exists and the Quran is a bunch of nonsense, I think that more than likely they're not believing in the Islamic concept of God.
Okay, and all the
Yes, and so
explanatory
I'm
power,
saying specifically that in this
that God's
context,
supposed to have,
pardon?
all the explanatory power that God's supposed to have is something that other gods can get away with. It doesn't have to be the case that I follow that scripture.
Yeah, but I'm saying that when you're pressing me on my reasoning for why this is the case, that this thing is justified, I am specifically appealing to the information conveyed by this specific type of God. So if you're saying that the person can believe in God, but believe the Quran is nonsense, I don't believe that in that specific hypothetical, that person believes in my conception of God, which is what I'm talking
Yeah,
about
they
here
don't
in this
believe in your
context.
conception. They believe in a different God, which I'm just curious as
Yes,
to
that's the
why it's the
point.
case. Yeah, well, if they just believe in a different conception of God, then what they believe in is still God.
Not God under my definition in this context. We've already went over
If
this.
we went over
Yeah.
this, but you've got contradictions now, which is that you
No,
both think
there's
it's
no
the case that
contradiction.
they believe. You both think it's the case they believe in a different conception of God, and also you think it's the case they don't believe in a conception of God.
No, that's not what is going on here. I said specifically from the beginning of this point that what I mean by God, when I'm saying the word God here in this specific context of the conversation, what I mean by this is Allah, the Islamic concept of God. You said,
Yeah, that's
okay,
not what
that's
that word
true.
means.
And then you also said, hold on. And
No,
then
I
you
didn't say
also
that's
asked me the
true. No, I
question,
didn't.
hold
That's
on,
a lie.
let that finish, please. Then you also asked the question, which is simply, is it the case that it is possible for someone to believe in God, but believe the Quran is nonsense? It's pretty plausible. And I said, more than likely, they don't believe in the Islamic concept of God. And this is what I mean by God. And you agree that this is what I mean by God in this
No, I
context.
didn't.
Yes, you did.
No, I do not. I don't. I don't agree that you mean that by God. I think what actually
Huh?
happened was you meant. I think what actually happened is the reason why you dipped out earlier is because you realized that there was no entailment from God existing to veganism being false, and so you
I
tried to
never
come up
made
with an
the claim
argument.
there's an
And so
entailment.
you ended
From the
up.
very beginning
And
of this
so
conversation,
you from the
no.
beginning of this conversation, which happened after the last one, where you left afterwards. So when you left afterwards was after you did make that claim. Then you said it's the case that the God
When did I make
existing.
a claim that it follows necessarily?
And then what is
You
the
spoke
case?
over me from the beginning.
Excuse me. And then what you said in this conversation was that it's the case that God is evidence of veganism being false. And then I asked you why is that? And then I think you came up with this post hoc definition afterward. I don't think you were using that definition when you said it.
Okay, so just to respond to what you've just said, you said that from the beginning, or rather from the prior conversation before I dipped out, I said it follows necessarily, is logically entailed from are morally permissible to actually eat animals. That's what you said, but it's funny because at the beginning of this conversation, when you asked me the question again, which is, does it follow or is it entailed from God existing that your position is false? I said yes, but I mean, knowing who Sinthe is, you'd
Oh,
have
hold
called
on.
me
So
out
you said
targets and
yes?
say, hold on, could I finish, please? You interrupted me.
I'm pointing
so as I
out.
was
Yeah, I'm going to
saying,
interrupt you often because you kind of have a
Sin, you
rambling
cannot
issue.
complain about
Look,
me
it's not.
interrupting you, but then speak
I
over me.
absolutely can. I can complain about a two
Wait,
sentence.
but so why are you
I
complaining?
can complain.
How
I'll
would you
explain to
complain
you. I'll
about it?
explain to you. I'll explain.
You're
So
just
I think
you're
it's the
just
case
abusing
that
your loud mic
interrupting.
now because of the fact
No,
that
there's
I'm
no
calling
loud
out
mic
to
I'm
me
abusing. What I'm
consistently.
telling you is that what
I'm
you're
saying
doing,
you're
where you
abusing me in
ramble
my defense.
indefinitely,
Really, but I
where
finish, please.
you
But I
ramble
finish, please.
indefinitely.
I'm not
No,
rambling.
if you
You're
ramble
interrupting me
indefinitely,
just to ramble.
eventually
But I finish, please.
somebody
We can
has
do
to
talking
interrupt
today.
you.
How about this?
But
Then? How about we do
if I
talking today?
instead
Then
get
how about
not
we do
even through
talking
one
today?
sentence and you interrupt,
How about
that's
we do
obviously an
talking today?
issue. So interrupting somebody
How
is not
about we do
always
talking today?
wrong. It is sometimes wrong. Like, for
How about we do
example, when you
talking today?
interrupt them to avoid letting them say their
Yeah, you
point,
interrupted my
interrupting
point just
somebody
to make a whole bunch of
instead to make
nonsensical.
sure that they
But I
can't
finish,
ramble
please.
forever, that's fine.
Okay, it's not a matter of rambling forever. I'm going to give you all the time for you to speak. But you realize for a fact you fucked yourself over after trying to claim a contradiction. Then you interrupted me to actually speak over me. So again, I'm going to finish my point.
How did I fuck
Okay?
myself up?
So just to be clear in this, I don't want to mute you, by the way. Just to be clear in this, right? You said from the beginning that I said from the prior conversation that it is a case that I said it follows from God existence, that it is morally permissible to eat animals. Now, I never said it logically follows in the entailment sense. I never even said it follows.
You actually
as
said it again in this
But
conversation
then you
just a
said
second ago.
afterwards, hold on, I'm still speaking. Still speaking.
I can
And then
tell.
you
Yeah,
said
you ramble
afterwards,
forever.
you then said afterwards, okay, I'm going to keep on rambling, I'm going to keep on crying about it.
Yeah,
So
you're
then
gonna
you said
keep on
afterwards, that in
rambling,
this
and then eventually
conversation,
you're gonna.
and you just can't shut the fuck up. Okay? So I'm going to give you all the time to speak, and when it's your turn to speak, I'm going to mute myself. Okay? I said specifically, okay, he went down the stage. Because for some reason,
Wait,
there's
hold on.
like
Did you mute him,
a
Apollo?
nasty tendency with people on PC having the need to like interrupt someone on mobile because they feel the need to actually rhetorically dominate the situation
Wait,
because
hold
they have a
on.
loud mic.
Wait. Who
Could I
kicked the
finish,
bro?
please?
Wait.
How could you get
Do
a
not.
moderator?
Wait, stop. Do not
Could you get a
perma.
Yeah.
moderator?
Wait.
Look, what
Stop.
you did is you
It's not
lied. It's on
perma if the
recording.
person
It's
interrupts
on
my points.
recording.
No, cool. Wait, hold on.
It's on recording.
Zizo,
You said it
moderate the
doesn't tailor.
conversation.
Listen. For
Yeah, you
both
can
of
be the
you,
moderator. You can mute me when I'm when he's speaking,
like,
and
mom,
when
that's
I'm
fine.
speaking,
But
you mute him. How about this?
here's what I'm going to tell you
Mhm.
both guys, okay? Unless you guys agree to moderate, I don't want either of you perma abusing each other, like server muting each other. Forget again if it's called perma abusing, whatever.
Okay,
Just don't
got you.
mute each other, okay? Listen,
Yeah, he complained about interruption, and I allowed him to finish. But when I was speaking,
listen,
like 2
and here's
sentences in, he started
yeah,
interrupting my.
This is
Apollo.
And I'm
Apollo's
allowed to
strategy.
convey
Interrupt
part of the
constantly,
information.
complain when it happens to him after 3 hours
I'm
of rambling.
complaining justifiably under the basis of you complaining about me interrupting you.
You're
What are you
seething because
talking
you're getting
about?
shit canned.
How
You're
could I
seething
finish,
because you're getting
please?
shit canned.
Send. How about you stop the grandstanding stuff and let me finish my point?
Malding
Okay?
because you're getting shit canned,
Why
retard.
is it the case you don't want to agree on the moderator?
Look at the
What
fucking
is it?
stress.
Stop.
I didn't say I
Send.
don't want to
Why
agree
do
on a
you not want to
moderator.
agree on the moderator?
I didn't say that.
Why do you not want to agree on the moderator?
I
Are you
didn't say
scared of
that.
a moderator?
I'm fine with a
Are you
moderator.
scared of a moderator the conversation because you
I
know
never
you
said I don't have it.
issue?
I never said I have an issue
Okay,
with a
let's
moderator.
agree on a
Let's get
moderator.
one.
Let's agree on
Apollo,
moderation.
Apollo, just 1 second. Let me explain
Okay,
something.
go for it, Zito.
Okay. The way I'm gonna moderate
Yeah.
both of you is I'm not gonna server mute someone and let the other speak. If you guys both start aping out on each other, I'm gonna server mute both of you, like for a 5-second timeout, and then I'm gonna unmute both of you and you restart again. That's all I'm gonna do.
Okay, that would be great. Lovely.
Okay.
So, Sin, do you want to go first or do you want me to go first?
Yeah, I'll go first. So this idea that he's not saying that God entails it, well, buddy, you just said that you are saying God entails it. It's on recording. You even said that now in this conversation. I called you out and I pointed to it when it happened. And on top of that, it'd be insane for you not to say that it's the case, that it entails it, because you're saying now that your definition of God is by definition the Islamic God and the one in the Quran. So if you're saying the Quran says so, then it would entail it. So you are saying it entails it.
Okay, so so I'm saying specifically that you said originally that in the prior conversation we had, I said that God, or rather God existence entails, right? It being the case that it is morally permissible to eat meat, which I never said, by the way. And then when you restarted this conversation, I said, I'm not making the claim that God entails X. I'm just saying God existent, and by God I'm specifically talking about the Islamic God, right? The Islamic God existence entails, sorry, not entails, is evidence for this position. And you agreed that I said that you even said in the response you've attempted to make to what I said, that you said that it is evidence for X to be true, but then that would be a switcher from your prior statements, which you have no evidence for. I'm pretty sure the recording substantiates my point. And just to, I guess, clarify another thing, you said that if the Islamic God exists, and I believe in the Islamic God existence, and he commands X, then obviously it would be something which is entailed from all of these other facts that it is morally permissible to eat animals. I agree from those are the facts specifically it is entailed, but from the fact of the Islamic God existing, just Islamic notion of God existing, right? It doesn't entail the proposition that it is morally permissible because we have interpretations and tafsir regarding the Quran, and it could be the case that we are misinterpreting a lot of the facts regarding the Quran, for example. Or it could be the case that the Islamic conception of God is true, but the Quran is not even true. It's logically possible, right? So it is entailed from, again, the Islamic God existing and him relaying said information that this is true, but it's not entailed simply from the proposition of the Islamic God existence that this is true, and that's the confusion you're on right now.
Yeah, so he couldn't even keep his own story straight. He had to say that it's the case that the belief in God entails, it gives evidence for. And then he said again, well, I guess the Islamic God is like compatible with the Quran not being true, which is funny because now he's granting this and he's no longer baking into the Quran being true to his definition of God. So I'm curious, okay, let's grant the idea that God's true. What's the evidence that the Quran's true? The Quran is filled to the brim with nonsense. It was written by a schizophrenic man who fucked a 9-year-old.
Okay, so
Like, it's just a
to
stupid
be
idea
clear,
to
you
believe
said
in.
I baked in. You said no, I'm no longer baking in my definition of the Islamic God that the Quran is true. No one has ever baked in the definition.
Is he going to answer my
of the
question?
Islamic
Who wants
God.
to, who
Hold on
wants
to
to bet
that
on it?
finish, please. Oh, interruptions again. Yikes! Someone is mad.
Yikes.
Anywho, I never baked
I'm
into
mad.
my definition of the
You're
Islamic
fucking
God that it is the
seething.
case, and you're still talking over me as you get increasingly insecure and unconfident because I'm destroying this
I
conversation.
just want you to answer my
So
question.
again, I'm going to finish my point, and you're still interrupting. Oh, yikes!
And you're
still
going to ignore
mad
the
again.
question.
So, and you're still interrupting. Oh shit! Could I finish now? So I was saying
You're
specifically
dodging.
that when you made the claim that I baked in the definition of the Islamic God that the Quran is true, that's not even true. That's not even substantiated by anything which has happened on the recording or anything which anyone has ever heard. I never said the Islamic God is something which entails by definition the Quran being true. I never said this specifically. I said the Islamic God is specifically about the conception of God in Islam. The conception of God in Islam is specifically talking about the
How long
attributes
will
we
he
assign
ramble?
to Islam or to God. So with that being said, and now that you've, I guess, I hope you can see this point and you're not delusional to
No,
believe
you're
that
just
you're actually
lying.
winning this point. I'm just going to make this other point. You asked me specifically, what's the evidence for the Quran being true, right? I'll just say that it is expected under the hypothesis of the Islamic God existence that the Quran is true. And so there's evidence for the Quran being true.
Yeah, so why is it expected on the hypothesis?
Because the Quran literally affirms the Islamic God being true. So if the
Yeah, so
Islamic
that's
God was
circular.
to exist, hold on, could I finish, please? Another interruption. If it is the case that a necessary proposition or one of the propositions of the Quran being true is that the Islamic God exists, and the Islamic God does in fact exist, a thing called successful prediction would come into play here, insofar as it would raise the probability of the Quran being true, because this is successful information which it predicts. There you
That's
go.
funny because your earlier argument for why it's the case that Christians don't believe in God is now nonsense. So if it's the case that what the Quran says is the Islamic God is true, I could just say, well, what they're referring to is not actually the Islamic God, and then you got no counter argument to that.
Wait, hold on there a second. What would be the justification for it being the case that what they're referring to would not be the Islamic God?
Because it makes
And by they, who are you referring to
because
here?
it makes false moral claims.
Wait,
People who
hold on there
believe
a
in the
second.
Quran.
Hold on. So just to be clear in this, would you agree that under all the conditions of laid out, which is that the Islamic God exists, the Islamic God consistently or in all cases relays accurate information about the world or the universe, then under these two conditions, it would be the case that if the Islamic God says that it is okay to eat animals, it is the case that it is okay to eat animals. Yes or no?
I don't think it is the case that God said that.
No. Wait, that's not the question. My question is under the conditions of the
Holy
Islamic
shit, he's
God
retarded.
existing. You're not even tracking the fucking conversation.
I ignored the fact that you asked that
You're
yes
not
or
even
no
tracking the
question
conversation.
doesn't follow because
My
obviously the
question
answer
was
is the
literally
argument's
conditional
logically valid
statements,
but not
and what you
logically
just did.
sound. It's
Sam, you're
obviously
not
the case that
tracking.
your argument's
Sam,
not
you're not
logically
tracking. Could I finish, please?
sound, which is
Could I
why I'm
finish,
telling
please?
you
Could I
I
finish,
reject
please?
one of the premises.
Are you dumb? I'm not giving an argument, dummy. What are you talking about
You did.
premises?
You
I'm going to
did.
repeat the question
You
for you. Listen,
did.
I'm going to repeat the question for you. No,
Oh
I
no,
didn't.
he's retarded.
If you allow me to repeat my question, you'd realize that you're confused and that I didn't give an argument, dummy. So the
Holy shit,
question
this is
simply
pathetic.
was, okay, if it is the case, are you tracking, moron? If it is the case that the Islamic God exists and the Islamic God always reveal accurate information, and he makes the claim that it is okay to eat animals, would it be the case that it is okay to eat animals? Yes or no? How
You're
is this
asking if that
question an
argument is
argument?
logically valid.
That's not an
Your
argument, it's a
question
question.
contains an argument. Your question contains an argument, stupid.
Did you just call a question an argument? Dummy, what are you
No,
talking about?
stupid. Your question
You
contains
said
an
the
argument.
question is, you said it's an argument originally. What are you talking about? You just
You're
said it
not
was, I
listening to
gave an
anything I'm
argument.
saying. You're embarrassing the fuck out
I'm
of
listening
yourself.
to what you're
This
saying.
is
You
probably
trip
one of
over
your worst
yourself because
debate.
you're
This
moronic.
is probably one of your worst debate performances.
So wait,
Yeah, he
you
got
didn't say
floored
a
by
while
that.
ago that I gave an argument. You said one of the premises are false when I wasn't even given an argument.
I'm
I
telling
asked
you
you a
that
question and your
thing.
response is,
You asked
"Oh,
me
one of the premises are
you asked
false,"
me a question. The question was whether or not
which
the argument was
contain no
logically valid.
premises. Got you. Continue.
It did contain premises.
How does a question contain premises
You're
if
oh
it's
my
not
god, are you retarded?
propositional?
Oh, hold on. That's so
Are
this
you
is
retarded? That's the
yeah,
question
I'll
which you
explain
should
to
be
you. I'll
answering right
explain to you.
now.
I'll explain to you. I'll explain to you. Don't talk. I'll explain to you.
Question
So
contains premises. Oh, yikes.
one, every single time somebody says that's a loaded question, what they mean is that a premise of the question, a premise of the question is something which is loaded into it. Questions do have premises. That's wrong too. But on top of this, what I referred to when I said you did provide an argument, the argument was in your question. You're asking me, is this argument logically valid? I'm telling you that argument is logically valid,
I
but
didn't
not
ask if
logically
the argument is
sound.
logically valid.
Yes, you did.
Not in specific,
You
no.
asked
So
me
I'm
if
going
it's
to do this again.
You did ask me
So
that. You asked
firstly,
me if
there's
it's the
nothing within
case
the
that these things
question.
being
There's
true
nothing
entail
within
this
the
other thing
question
being true.
which entails. Hold on. Do you think if someone says if it is the case that the laws of logic is false,
Do you
then
think you're
X
actually
is true
engaging
and
with
X being?
substance right now?
Hold on,
This is
hold
like
on.
just
I'm
ass
actually
rhetoric.
engaging right
This
now
is
by
just
giving you an
booty trash
example,
rhetoric
which
off
might
the fucking
actually make it very simple for you to actually understand here. Okay. So I'm saying specifically, if someone has
Yo, hello, sorry. Sinthe, come back up. I was meeting both of you because like I literally couldn't hear either of you, and I don't think anybody could hear either of you. So yeah, I told you guys if you both start drowning each other in the way you did, I'm gonna like server mute both of you for like a few seconds. I want you guys to reset, and then we're gonna start it again. Okay, I'll start by like unmuting the both of you.
W moderation.
That's
guys.
fine. I just saw that I got server muted and assumed Paulo did it.
No,
I
did it. I did it.
That's fine. That's fine.
yeah, I'm not
Some of
muted
my
again,
phone is a
man.
little bit slow.
So who do you want to go first, Zizo?
Both of you
I'll
go.
mute
Just,
myself with
like I'm just
consent.
resetting you guys. Like it's just to restart. Both of you guys.
Okay, cool. So I don't think that's going to really work because we have like a tendency of like, interrupting, I guess, in this conversation. Now, I'm going to say simply that as it pertains to what I was saying, you said that the question I had, or the question I proposed, had premises. Well, for one, if you want to assume that this is the argument I'm given specifically for the Islamic God or for like the more permissibility to eat animals, that's fine. But that question in particular, right, when I'm saying if X is true, then would it be the case of Y follows? That's not an argument, right? You can say that the content of the question is motivated a separate argument, or rather an argument which is separate from the question, but it doesn't follow from the content of the question motivating something which is separate from that question, which is an argument, that it is the case that the question in itself has premises, which would make it an argument. That's absolutely moronic. It is the case that for anything which has premises, it is the case that it is an argument. And we both agree that questions are not arguments. So what are you even talking about?
Are you tracking at all? I'm saying your question contains
I'm
an
tracking
argument.
you,
Your
but actually
question
not
is the
tracking.
argument, retard.
You literally said the question had premises, correct?
There are premises of your argument in the question, yes.
You said so now you're saying that there's question. Okay, now you're saying
Now
the
I'm
question
saying this.
contains
I've been
premises.
saying this. You're
Yeah,
stumbling
you
over yourself
switched
because you
up,
know you're
buddy.
being
You
retarded.
switched up, buddy. Look at this.
There's no switch up. You're retarded.
Yes, it is. I'm going to point at this trip up. Okay, you said originally that it is the case that the question itself contains premises. That question contains premises. Now you're saying the question contains information which happens to be something which motivates premises of an argument which is separate from the question.
I
That's
didn't say that.
different claims. Holy
So
shit!
what I just said,
Time?
I'll say it again, is that what I said, and I'll say it again, is that your question contains an argument, and that argument has premises, and so your question contains premises of that argument.
Okay, so you understand that when you say the question contains premises, you're indirectly saying that there's something within that specific question which supports a given proposition. And so if the question is not propositional, then it makes absolutely no sense to claim that this thing contains premises. Yeah, it's absolutely retarded to
You're
even
so
say
stupid.
that something
I'll just
which is
give you an
not a
example.
proposition has premises.
I'll just give you an example.
Giving an example does not support your
I'll
point.
give you an example. It will support my point because I can give you an example of a question that contains premises. Would that support my point? Yes or no? Yes or no? Yes or no?
Give the question.
Yes
or the analogy, I should say. The example.
Answer what I just said. Answer what I just said. If I give an example of a question that contains premises, would that support my point?
Of course.
Yeah, so obviously then questions can support my point by showing an example. So that was wrong. Yeah, you went silent
Obviously,
again, huh? Yeah, you were wrong there, weren't you?
Hold on. You just said the water.
Yeah, you want to get into this stupid semantic debate. You're wrong in the semantic.
What's the justification for that question containing premises?
So the justification for your particular question containing premises is the fact that your question contains an argument in it, which is the quote that you've given of an argument. And then one of the things in that argument is the premises of the argument. And I'll give you an example of a question.
Hold on there a second.
Excuse me. No, you don't tell me to hold on. No, I'm telling you, I'm going to give you an example of a question. Excuse me. You said that if I give you an example of a question that contains premises, that would be something that supports my point. So I'll give you an example of a question that contains premises. Is it the case that the following argument, which goes, if it's the case that Socrates is a man, then he is mortal. Socrates is a man, therefore he's mortal. Is that an argument?
That question itself? No.
I didn't ask the question. The thing I quoted in the question, is that an argument?
Yeah, you're referencing an argument which is separate from the question.
So I'm referencing an argument inside of my question. So my question contains an argument, right?
No, the argument is something which is separate from the question. The question is just referencing an argument.
The question is the following argument Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is immortal because of the fact that if you are a man, then you are mortal. Is it the case that that contains an argument? You don't think that question there contains the argument that I just provided in quotes?
Yeah,
I'll type it out for you.
the problem here is simply that using originally my question contains an argument and so or contains premises and so far as it is the case that the question itself is attempting to support the given proposition.
I'm going to give you it written out, and you tell me whether or not it's the case that this argument contains a question. I'll just want to make sure that you can see it with your eyes.
Sorry, go for it. There's like dogs in the background. Hello?
There it is in the pop-out chat. Take a look at that. So that question, does it contain an argument inside of it?
Red carpets? Which part is it?
In the pop-out chat of Purgatory.
Okay, got
Ring.
you. Hold on. Yeah, I think it contains an argument under different semantics, of course.
So that question contains an argument. Does that question contain an argument which contains premises?
Under different semantics, of course.
Under standard semantics.
Yeah, under standard semantics, I don't think that's the case given the example you've given.
Well, I'm the one who said that you don't get to insert your retard semantics into my words.
No.
Sorry,
it's
buddy.
not
That's not how it works.
because you were literally trying to say that my question contains premises insofar as it was attempting to support a proposition.
No, what I told you is Nope. What I told you is your question.
So that example doesn't even work.
And it contains premises. So it's the case that I've given you. Just to be clear, I don't know why. I don't want you running. I don't want you running.
I'm not running from anything.
I want you to give me a yes or no to the following question.
Your example.
Is it the case
that
argument just really clearly? It's going to work very well. Watch this.
No, it doesn't
work. You're about to see
what you meant by containing.
Yeah, you don't want it to happen because you know it's going to work. So really clearly, that argument right there, does that argument right there contain premises of an argument?
Not given your semantics in the conversation, no. Originally, no, definitely not.
So that argument, so just to be clear, that question contains an argument, and that argument in the question contains premises, but that question does not contain premises.
The equivocation here is so crazy. The problem
There's no equivocation. This is straightforwardly what I meant.
Yes, there is, because when you're saying that my question contains premises, you are literally trying to make the argument that my question was in support of a given proposition. And you said
nope.
Yes, and you said specifically, you tried to lay out an argumentative criticism towards my question.
Because you were asking me if an argument was valid. I told you, yes, I do think it's the case it's valid.
And then I said specifically, the question is not an argument. So why even laying out an argumentative criticism?
So
initially, Sinthe, could I finish, please? So initially,
when you're talking about the idea, I don't think you can finish.
When you're talking about the idea, I'm not talking forever. Just can't actually. You're not patient. No, you're not patient. So anyway,
let's see how long it goes.
I was going to say, yeah, let's see how long without you interrupting. Yeah, so as I was saying, when you're saying that the question contains premises, all you mean there is simply that the question is, you could say, linguistically identical to some argument for a proposition in that content, which it isn't. And I said to you as to why it isn't, because it is not something just proposing some given justification for a proposition, but it is clarifying your perspective on the proposition. In this case scenario, like, of course, it contains premises, but the semantics of contains there is radically different from what you meant originally in the conversation.
No, it isn't. Prove it.
Yes, it is.
Okay, prove it.
The proof for this claim is quite literally you making an argumentative criticism towards my question by saying it does not support the proposition. That's the proof for it.
I'm telling you that your question was to ask me whether an argument was valid, and then I responded by giving to you the reason why it's not sound, because I agree it's valid.
You literally said, as a means of criticizing the supposed argument you thought my question was, by saying, I reject the first premise. And I was saying, wait, hold on a second. So you say reject the first premise as a means of implying that the question or what I said to you was an argument. And I'm saying that what I said to you was not an argument because it was a question. You said it was an argument because you didn't even know what the question was. You didn't even hear the question really fully. And then I repeated the entire sentence. And then you realized that it was actually a question. Then you try to equivocate on this and say, well, here are the Apollo. I can give a question which, technically speaking, has an argument or references an argument. And this would prove my point. It doesn't prove your point because you're just being intellectually dishonest on this point right now.
Do you think that anybody's stupid enough to fall for what you're doing?
I think you're stupid enough to actually concede this point because you're doing bad in the conversation.
You think I'd be stupid enough to concede this point? I agree that it'd be stupid to concede this point. So we're at least both on board with the idea that it'd be stupid to concede this point.
Yeah, stupid to concede this point because
I want you. So I think that it's the case that your argument was contained in your question, and you were asking that question to verify whether or not I would agree that the argument you were about to provide is logically valid. if you want, you can repeat your question to the rest of the room, and we can see if it's the case that they agree with me, because I think it's the case that anybody who hasn't heard your question yet, upon hearing it, is going to immediately realize that what I'm saying is dead fucking right. Go ahead
We
and
share
repeat
the
your
same
question.
recollection of what the question was. We just don't share the same recollection regarding your intention behind your response to my question. Now, with that being said, I'm just going to make this clear. Is it the case,
Go ahead and
Sinthe,
repeat the question.
that in most... Hold on. Could you answer my question with a yes or no real quickly? Is it the case that in most
You haven't answered
cases,
mine.
when someone... Oh, you're running away right now. Is it the
You
case
haven't
that in
answered my
most
question.
cases, when someone... I've just
Why are
answered
you
your question.
dodging?
I'm not
I asked you
dodging
to
your question. You're
repeat. I
dodging
asked
my
you to
question.
repeat your initial. I asked you to repeat your initial question, not provide a new one.
What was my response to that response that you made?
I'm not interested in answering questions from you until you answer mine.
Oh, wait, hold on. What did I say in response to that specific, you could say,
See,
command?
it sounds like what you're doing right now is asking a question you're supposed to be answering.
Yeah, I'm asking the
again.
question to see if you're actually on track with the conversation. Of course. Let's see.
Answer my
Let's test
question.
your tracking skill. I answered the question. What was my response to your question?
You didn't answer
Tell
my
me.
question.
Okay, I'm
You
going to
didn't.
tell my responses to your question. Yeah. So your question clearly is assuming that there's some recollection clash on what the question was. It is not. So I said to you specifically
No, it
by
doesn't.
pointing out the redundancy of the question, that I don't need to respond or repeat the question because we both know what the question was and we agree on what the question was. What you
Oh,
don't agree
fuck,
on
I
is
realize
the
what's
intention
happening. Oh
behind
no, you're
the
self-conscious
response you
because
made
you.
to my question.
Oh no, I
Oh, no, you
get
just
it.
messed up yourself.
I figured out why you're so fucked in this and why you won't answer the question. You just forgot what your question was. Oh
I
no.
didn't.
I'm
I
not
didn't.
even.
You
I'm not telling you there's
gaslighting?
a. Excuse
Is
me.
this your
Excuse me.
best attempt at
I'm
gaslighting,
not.
Sinthe?
Excuse me,
Ooh,
little retard. I'm not telling you that there's a recollection
ironic.
crash. What I said to you was, I think if anybody else heard your question who didn't hear it yet, they'll immediately realize that I'm dead fucking right. So I just want you to go ahead and repeat your question for the room. Go ahead.
Okay, we'll repeat the question. So I'll repeat the question. So the question is me asking you, is it the case that if the Islamic God exists, and it is true that he always relays accurate information about the world, then it would be the case, right, that it is true that it is morally permissible to eat animals. Now, for one, right, I'm saying that your
That was the question.
response to this, yeah, that was the question, word for
That
word.
was the question.
Now,
That is word for word the
yeah,
question,
so
and obviously it
let's see
contains an
this now.
argument. Thank you for
Sid,
getting
now
baited,
answer my
retard.
question.
Thank
Sid,
you.
now answer my question. Now answer
That's
my
so sad.
question. Is it the case? Is it the case that in most dialectical situations where someone says they reject a particular premise, they responded to a given argument, or they responded under the assumption that there's an argument given? Yes or no?
Yeah, no, you're having like a retard moment. You're having an autism alert.
Whoa, wait, hold on.
So
Yes or
I'm telling
no?
you, I just told you no,
Yes,
retard.
make up your mind. Yes or
I
no?
just told you no.
No, so it is not the case that when people are saying, generally
Are
speaking,
you sorry? Did
hey,
you
I reject the
unironically
wait,
you went
don't believe,
spastic
hold
on
on,
me?
Sin,
You went
Sin,
spastic on me, but I
think you're
directly answered your
lying.
question. The first word
You're
out of my mouth was no,
sacrificing your
wasn't
moral
it?
integrity for a Discord debate right now. This is crazy. Look,
There's no
you are basically
sacrifice of my
saying to
moral
me, you
integrity.
expect,
You're
do you
embarrassing the
think we're...
fuck out of yourself. You're losing ethos. Oh, we're getting muted.
Unfortunately, yes. Even though it's a little bit slow, but like, I don't see like why you guys talking about like drowning each other out. Like nobody can understand both of you guys. I'm just gonna give you again like the chance to reset for both of you. Let's stay on topic. That's all. I'm gonna mute you too, Sinthe. Yeah, you guys can reset.
So at this point, that question, the fact that it's been like publicly blasted to the room, anybody who hadn't already heard it, now you have. There's basically no more. There's nothing else for me to prove at this point. Very obviously, the question contains an argument. And it contains an argument by the same sense that question I typed in the pop-out chat contains an argument.
It contains an argument, you said.
Yes.
Wait, hold on there a second. Let's just go up to your question that you said contains an argument. Okay. The question that you presented, which contains an argument to the conclusion. Correct?
The question
There's
that
a
I presented
conclusion in my
contains a
question.
conclusion. Yes, there is.
Yeah, so in your question, which you said is an example of questions having arguments, you said,
what did you?
Is it the
Yeah,
case
it's right after
the argument
therefore,
that the argument? You said, is it the case that the argument Socrates is a man and all men are mortal, therefore Socrates is immortal, is logically valid? That specific question, under your semantics, under your current semantics, has an argument and it has a conclusion. But you're saying that my question currently, which does not even have a conclusion, has an argument?
Go ahead and repeat your question again. Tell everyone it doesn't have a conclusion.
Yeah, the question only has two premises. Yeah, the question only has two premises. Just saying that, is it the case that if it was to be true, and that the Islamic God exists, and he always relays accurate information, then it would be the case that he'd be right about this matter regarding veganism, or
then it would be the case that he'd be right regarding this matter of veganism. There's your conclusion, stupid.
That's not the conclusion.
That's obviously the conclusion.
You think it is the case that if I affirm it,
then
do you
this
think a
conclusion
conditional
would be
statement? Do you think a conditional statement is necessarily an argument?
I think the one you gave was.
Oh, wait, hold on. So you agree it's not necessarily an argument, correct?
I think the one you gave was.
What's the justification for? Okay, independence of all context. what's the justification for the question me asking or I asked in the conversation be
Because
something which
you're
can change an
asking,
argument?
you're asking if these two premises entail this conclusion. That's clearly what you're asking.
How is that indicative of me affirming that it entails this conclusion?
Oh, did I just say that correctly then? Was I right there? That you did in fact say
Wait, hold
this that
on.
you asked me?
You
I'm
understand when
sorry,
someone's
excuse me.
proposing
No,
an
no, no,
argument?
don't panic. No, no,
You
no, don't
understand
panic.
when someone's proposing
Don't
an
run
argument?
away, Apollo.
I'm
Don't
not
run
running. You're going
away.
sprinting right
I
now.
want
Look at
you. I
you.
want you to go
Running
ahead and
and
answer me
away.
directly. Is it the case that you were asking me
Uh-huh.
whether or not these two premises entail this conclusion?
Yeah, I was asking you for your argumentative perspective on a given set of
Nice.
premises.
So
Yeah.
there is a conclusion.
Doesn't mean
in the
there's an
question.
argument in the question.
Yeah. So there was a conclusion there.
No, doesn't follow from that.
No, there's no conclusion there.
Yeah, all I mean by there's
You
a
asked me
conclusion there is that
if
there's
premise
do
X
you
and Y
understand?
entail
Do you
conclusion
understand that
Z.
when you
If
said
conclusion Z isn't
originally,
in the question,
when you
this
said
is embarrassing.
when you said originally that the question that
When you
you've
said
given the
originally,
example,
when
and says an argument, okay, it is the case that you're saying that there's a conclusion affirmed, right, with a set of premises. Now, it is not the case that there's a conclusion affirmed explicitly within my question, as you agreed with.
I don't care if it's confirmed explicitly.
Hold on. Do you think that it is the case when people give an argument, it is the case that they're affirming the conclusion to be true alongside the premises?
Implicitly, you can do that as well.
Hold on. Yes or no?
Do you understand why it's not
Yes.
relevant?
Okay, so the answer is yes. So how is it the case that it was affirming the conclusion of the question to be true?
Do you understand you can affirm something and not be explicit?
Oh, wait, hold on. How is it
What
the
are you
case? Don't
choking on?
dodge, don't dodge, don't
What
dodge,
are you
Sinthe. You're
choking on?
panicking.
What
How
are
is
you
it the
choking on?
case? How is it the case that it was affirming the conclusion in the
So
question?
what you asked implicitly confirms
That's
the
a
conclusion.
dodge.
You're saying
That's
it's
a
the
dodge.
case that I'm telling you.
I'm asking
You
how
asked
is
me
it
how
the
does
case,
it
not that you
I'm
believe that this is
telling
the
you.
case.
I'm telling
No,
you
you're
how.
saying it is the case.
I'm telling you
Explain
how.
No, you're saying it is the case.
I'm
Not
very
explaining
clearly
how.
telling you how. You're just panicking.
No, you're saying it is the case that it was affirming the conclusion, not
Do
that
you
I have an
genuinely?
explanation how.
You must think the average IQ of this room is like fucking sub 20. Like nobody's gonna fall
Yeah,
for this.
because you're in the room right now. That's why. So answer my question.
You are genuinely super retarded. You're going full fucking
Oh, yeah, I'm
retard.
super
I'm answering
retarded.
your
So you're gonna
question,
describe me as a super retarded person?
and then you
That's
just keep
crazy.
interrupting because you understand that I'm directly answering it.
You've been the one interrupting me through the conversation.
So
What are
the
you talking about?
reason why I'm gonna go ahead and tell you the answer to your question again, but this time don't talk and just listen. You'll hear it. So the reason why it's the case that you are affirming a conclusion is because of the fact that implicitly with that question, you are asking me to verify if an argument that you would like to present is a valid argument. That's what you're trying to do. You're asking me to confirm its validity, and then what you're going to do afterwards is you're going to try to prove both of the conclusions, or both of the premises, sorry, of that argument so you can get to the conclusion. That was very obviously what you're doing. Anybody who doesn't have autism is going to realize this.
Give me 1 second.
Oh, is his phone on 1% again? Oopsie.
No, it's actually 43% currently.
Damn, this motherfucker took it to 43% real quick after that 1% with bonk.
My phone charges fast. So anywho, to
How is it always dead
then?
then? What the
Because it
fuck?
actually
Phone's
toggled to
always dead, but it charges fast? I don't believe you.
It isn't always dead.
That shit's dead all the time, motherfucker. You both know that.
No,
Like,
it isn't.
look, aggressive,
Just repeat yourself
aggressive
because
debate aside, we
talking to
both know your
someone
fucking
else.
phone always dead, bro.
Seth, repeat yourself. Go ahead. I was talking to someone else. That's why I went to mute.
I'm telling you that your phone's like always dead.
I'm talking about the thing you said before I went to mute. So you're like, or after I went to mute.
Oh my.
A while ago. Yeah.
What's the point? Everybody in the room already heard it.
Is about whether or not the question I gave contained an argument or something. And I was basically trying to extrapolate that it is not the case it contains an argument, given the fact that when you're proposed an argument, it is the case that you're affirming the conclusion to be true. And then you're trying to justify being the case that was affirming the conclusion to be true in the question. But then you conceded that it is not the case it's affirming such, but rather I was questioning your perspective of the validity of a potential argument I might give after the question.
So I'm actually still kind of curious. I know that you're like going to be stuck on this point forever because you think you're going to be able to dig yourself out. I don't really care about like beating you over the head with it anymore because at this point it's like clear that you were wrong. I'm kind of curious to know regarding the idea that the Islamic God is evidence in favor of the Quran being true. What if I just say the thing that the Quran calls the Islamic God? They don't really call it the Islamic God, I guess, but the thing the Quran refers to as God isn't actually true Islamic God. What happens if somebody says that? What do you say instead?
I'll just give the evidence as to why this is the case that the Quran is referencing the Islamic God, because the Quran satisfies or relates all the given facts about the Islamic God under my concept.
Well, I would say that it's the case that if the Quran affirms it, that's evidence against the Islamic God, and if the Islamic God exists, then it's evident. Then the Quran is likely not to confirm it because of the fact that Quran contains so many contradictions in logical error and scientific inaccuracy.
What are the contradictions?
So, in addition to the idea that life is made from dirt, It's also the case the Quran says that life was made from a clot of blood.
Okay, so what specific scholar you're appealing to for the sake of justifying this tafsir of the Quran?
I'm not justifying interpretation; it just says it explicitly.
Wait, hold on there a second. There are specific times in the Quran where there's something which is explicitly stated in the English version, which is not even the Quran, by the way, because there's no scholar who believes the English version of the Quran is identical to the Quran itself.
It's said in the
Whereas
Arabic as
it's
well.
actually the case that there's a different interpretation in the Arabic version. I'll give you one example. An example is in one of the surahs where they talk
That's
about
not relevant.
being. I'm giving the example right now, buddy. Just calm down, okay? So in one of the examples, there's a word in English in the English version of
It's
the Quran.
irrelevant. You don't need to
which
give examples.
Translates. It is relevant, by the way. You're gonna understand how it is relevant when you're done speaking. Okay. So there's a verse in the Quran. There's an ayah in the Quran which talks about Allah, or implies Allah being deceptive, like him deceiving someone. Now, the word specifically, I'm pretty sure it's identical to literally just deceive in the English version. But in the Arabic version, right, it is the case that the word just means planning and not deceiving someone. And so there are a lot of cases in the Quran, right, whereas it is the case that the word meaning, right, of the Arabic version gets lost in the translation process. And this is why tafsir is something which is necessary before you even make criticism toward the Quran, by the way, because tafsir is something which is started even amongst Arabic scholars as a means of understanding the Quran, because even the times and the places in which the Quranic verses are being revealed has an impact on the meaning, irrespective of what you think it is explicitly stated. Right. So do you have any sort of like scholar which is backing up your interpretation here?
So that was all a bunch of rant to do basically nothing to argue in favor of my point, to ask the same question again, which I already answered, which is just that I don't have one and I don't care about having one because the Quran says it explicitly. The Quran says that humans were created from a clot of congealed blood, and also the Quran says that humans were created from dust. It says that the first man was created from blood, and also that the first man was created from dust. That's a contradiction. Do we agree that if it's the case that the Quran if it's the case that the Quran contains both the claim that God created man, the first man, from blood, and also that God created the first man from dust? That's a contradiction.
Yeah, what they said was even granting your interpretation, which you have yet to justify the credibility of, that doesn't even establish a contradiction. Simply
Really?
because of the idea that it is logically possible for Allah to create the first man with both blood and dirt, right? So it's not saying specifically that the first man was created only from blood or the first man was created only from dirt. It is just merely making the claim,
It actually
which can
does
be
say
interpreted
only.
in a different way, that it is created from dirt, or the first man was created from dirt and the first man was created from blood. There's nothing which is indicating that it is ruling out the other property from which Allah could
No,
be using.
96.2 actually does say only. 96.2 says merely a clot of congealed blood is 96.2. So you're wrong. And on top of
Wait,
that, the
hold on. So
Quran,
now you're
and on
saying it
top
stays
of that,
merely.
and on top of that, now you got fucked. You fucked yourself. It also says that in the Quran that it was created out of nothing. So how do you
Okay, so hold
how
on
do
there
you
a
square
second.
all
You
three
said
of these
originally,
away?
wait,
Your new
hold on.
interpretation
You said
directly
originally,
contradicts another
you said,
verse.
so just to be
Oh
clear,
no.
your initial articulation of the Quranic verses was something which is misleading, correct? Because you didn't
No,
involve the
it
word
isn't.
only. Yes, it is, because given your initial articulation of what you said verbatim, it would not be the case there's a contradiction.
It says merely.
You didn't say merely originally, you just said the Quran says the first man was created from blood,
What the
and the Quran
Quran?
says
Have you
another
read
thing.
the Quran?
Of course I did.
Okay, so you're familiar with this verse, right?
Of course.
And you're familiar with the fact that it says merely.
Well, I'm familiar with what the verse says, but not what the verse says verbatim. No.
Okay, so the verse does say
Mhm.
it was from a mere clot of congealed blood. You are dead wrong, and so it does say explicitly in the Quran that it is the case that it contains that it was made from
How
merely
is
a
that
clot of
dead
congealed
wrong?
blood.
You never
And what
denied
you're
the
trying
claim
to,
that it is said merely.
because you're saying there's no contradiction because it'd be logically
In
consistent
what
to say it's
you
made from a
said, yes,
mix
there's
of
no contradiction in
because
your
of the
initial
fact
articulation.
because what we're arguing about is whether or not the Quran contains a contradiction, not whether or not it was clear enough to you why it contains a contradiction. So
Yeah, so
it
what
does
you got
say
confused on
merely.
is
It
me
does
saying,
say merely,
what was the
and
case, is that
on
there's no
top of
contradiction between what
that,
you said originally.
your interpretation directly contradicts the Quran. Your interpretation directly contradicts 1967 and 5235.
I didn't give an interpretation. What are you talking about? I said specifically that your initial articulation of what the Quran says wouldn't entail a contradiction. I never said specifically that my interpretation entails a lack of contradiction. I said what
You
you said originally, which
interpreted
is
it as
a
being
word for
blood
word,
and
which is word for
dust
word.
mixed
You
together.
saying word for word, and we have this on the recording. You said specifically that the Quran says the first man is made out of blood and the first man is made out of dirt. You said that's what the Quran said, word
Correct.
for word. I'm saying given that specific
Implicitly, I'm referring
interpretation,
to in
hold
its
on. I'm saying
entirety.
given that specific
You're just gonna
interpretation,
spaz and
there's
pain. You're
no
just gonna
contradiction.
You're just gonna spaz forever.
Yeah, and then you switched it up
Oh
saying
my
merely,
god.
which I agree the
The
Quran says this.
Quran. Oh, you agree the Quran says this?
As the English version of the Quran, to be more specific, says this.
Does the Arabic version say different?
I think, the Arabic version obviously going to say something different, or it's going to have a different connotation.
Does it say something other than it being the case that it's merely a clot of
I don't
congealed
read
blood?
Arabic, so I don't even know if it says something differently. That's what we feel the scholar.
So then you don't. So then you have no defense. So what you should do is you should
I
learn
have a
Arabic,
defense.
since
My defense
clearly
specifically
the
is gonna
only
be the
way for
interpretation
you
of
to
Quran.
read the Quran,
There's only
the only
split
way
response
for you
history.
to read the Quran is to read it in Arabic, according to you. If it's the most important text ever
Of course,
written,
if you
I
understand
feel
the
like
Quran,
the effort
that's why
required to learn
tafsir is
one
not
more
even
more
universal.
language would be something that's worth it to you, so that you can read the Quran, since
Yeah,
it's the most
I
important
literally
text
told
ever
you.
written to you.
I literally told
But
you.
what you gave is both contradictory with the verses mentioned and also explicitly contradictory with 1967.
Yeah, so
19:67 from the
I'm saying
Quran.
that specifically for contentious verses in the Quran, right? It is best, right?
This is what
for
the
you to
Muslim
have
debaters
your
do. They
knowledge
just
and
dodge
prayer.
and evade
Also,
and
it is the
ramble. They
case.
can't
Also, it
address
is
the
the case.
contradictions of the
Give an
Quran.
example. I have
They
given
have
an
no way of
example,
addressing them.
and you just keep on interrupting. I've given an
What they do
example.
instead is they run around, they dodge and evade, they try their best to avoid any kind of conversation, any kind of addressing to what's actually being said in the argument.
Yeah, Sinthe, what do the
So
Quran
you think
is?
it's the case? You think it's the case that the
You think
Quran is
any
compatible
Islamic
with the
scholar
claim?
believes that the English
You
version of the
think
Quran is
it's
the Quran?
the Islamic scholars obviously think the Quran's true, and so they have a vested interest in showing there's not contradictions. I don't have to appeal to Islamic scholars. Islamic scholars for proving to you that there are contradictions in the Quran, because my interpretation is clearly correct, which is why it's the case those Islamic scholars who did the translation work, said that it's the case, this is what the Quran says. So you, instead of doing all this rambling and dodging and avoiding, can directly address the idea that the Quran contains a clear contradiction. Yes or no? Is it the case that Allah created man out of nothing? Yes or no? Yes or no? Yes or no to my question. Is it true that the Quran says, that man was created out of nothing, and out of a clot of congealed blood, and out of dust? Yes or no?
Is it the case that the English version of the Quran is something which is granted by Muslims to be the Quran?
You don't grant it to be the Quran.
Some
Muslims are going to. Some Muslims are going to.
Or there's the vast majority of Muslims who know what the fuck they're talking about would never say that the English translation.
So this is just the no true Scotsman fallacy. I'm not interested in you saying, well, all the Muslims who really do it would understand, because it's irrelevant to me, because you can't even read the Arabic. You can't even read the Arabic. You can't even read the Arabic. So I want you to address this contradiction instead of rambling. The question I asked you was, once again, is it the case the Quran both says that man was created out of nothing, and also that man was created out of congealed blood, and also that man was created out of dust? Is that true, yes or no? Does it say something otherwise in the Arabic? Does it say otherwise in the Arabic, yes or no? Does it say otherwise in the Arabic, yes or no?
Holy shit, you're so.
Does it say otherwise in the Arabic, yes or no? Does it say otherwise in the Arabic, yes or no?
What you're talking about there is not the Quran.
Yes or no? Does it say otherwise in the Arabic?
I'm agnostic on that claim. You'd have to be saying that.
Okay, then if it did say it in the Arabic, would a contradiction be contained?
Your claim is presupposing.
If it does say it in the Arabic, would a contradiction be entailed? If it does say it in the Arabic, would a contradiction be entailed?
Of course.
Okay, so you are agnostic on whether or not it's the case the contradiction is entailed in the Quran. Thank you.
Whether or not you're
that's a half concession. We're 50% of the way there. Thank you. You've half conceded. You are agnostic on whether or not you are not. You initially. Excuse me. You initially. No, I didn't. When did I say I don't have evidence for the claim? When did I say I don't have evidence? When did I say I don't have evidence?
And there's no evidence for the Quran or the book you're talking about.
So you started. Excuse me. You don't have to ramble. You said that it was the case the Quran does not contain contradictions, correct? You said that it's the case the Quran does not contain contradictions, correct?
Of course.
Okay, and now you've said you're agnostic whether or not the Quran contains contradictions, correct?
I'm agnostic on your claiming justified.
Yes or no to my fucking question, retard. Yes or no? Is it the case that you are now agnostic?
I'm fucking retard.
Then spit it the fuck out, retard.
Yeah, you're not even tracking. Holy fucking shit.
Yes?
Yeah, it would be the case that there's no contradiction given the current evidence.
So you said that it's the case you are agnostic on whether or not there are contradictions in the Quran, correct?
I'm agnostic on your claim regarding you believe in.
Answer my question, not another question you think was asked. Answer my question. The next words out of your mouth should be the next words out of your mouth. The next words out of your mouth should be a yes or a no. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you the question again, and this time I'm going to hopefully get an answer from you. Is it the case that you said you were agnostic on whether or not the Quran contains contradictions? Yes or no?
When I say I'm agnostic on, I'm talking specifically about
the next words out of your fucking mouth, retard, should be a yes or a no. Try again. Try again, retard. Try again, retard.
It points you're not tracking.
You are running away. You are being evasive. You are dodging. You know damn well that it's the case the Quran does contain contradictions. You know damn well it does. What you are doing instead is said that you are agnostic on whether or not the Quran contains contradictions. Yes or no?
No, I didn't.
You didn't say that? It's on recording.
It's on record that me saying I'm agnostic, but you failed to even interpret what I meant by agnostic in this context. Yeah, I'm specifically talking about.
It's on recording that you said you were agnostic. That's pathetic. You're fucked. Oh no! You even know it's. You even know it's in your. You even know it's in the recording. Oh no!
In favor of the proposition that the Quran contains contradictions. I'm saying that my epistemic attitude towards that specific argument given, right, given the current empirical data, will be something which leads me to an agnostic state. But that's not to say that independently of such, I'm not justified in believing there's no contradiction. I'm speaking in isolation.
I'm going to ask it again.
You'll be able to understand this too.
I'm going to ask it one more time, and let's see if you'll answer it the same way. Yes or no? Is it the case that you've said in the context of this conversation that you are agnostic on whether or not the Quran contains contradictions?
Specifically in reference to the point you're on, of course. In isolation, yes. But outside of this point, if we consider all the relevant data, it is not the case I'm agnostic on the proposition.
Yeah. So at this point, I feel like the debate has come to a close. If you have anything you like to, I have. It's done. I shit canned you. So what you can do now, here's what I think we should do. If you want, what we can either do is we can both give our closing statements. I'm fine with doing that just to have like a pinch off of the conversation. Pinch this turd off, you know what I mean? That's one option. Are you cool with that?
Okay, sure, definitely. So you want me to go first, obviously?
If you'd like to. Okay. You could choose.
Okay, sure. I got to pray like in 15 minutes, so I guess this is going to be where the debate ends, right? Or want to continue it some other time?
We can continue now, or we can, or you can go to closing. It's up to you. I'm just giving you the options.
Okay, yeah, I'll give the closing. Yeah, got you. So, my closing statement is quite simply that my opponent failed to understand a couple of points and prevaricated and sprinted away from a lot of points here because of his inability to actually engage in any sort of substantive information of the conversation. Some of these points being primarily the most recent point, where he says there's a contradiction in the Quran. And obviously, when you're talking about the Quran, you're specifically talking about the words revealed to the Prophet Muhammad by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so, given this specific claim, right, he would have to be presupposing that the book he's talking about there, which is English translations of the Quran, which no Muslim whatsoever would ever say is identical to the Quran itself, or is the Quran itself, at least if they're knowledgeable on their religion, right? He's presupposing that the information that he's appealing to establish someone like of a contradiction is going to be something which is identical to what is stated in the Quran. Then I asked him specifically, and I pointed out the importance of tafsir, which he doesn't even know about because he's fucking retarded, never did any research on Islam. He just came in to criticize on the basis of ignorance, okay? I said, tafsir is something which is necessary for the interpretation of contentious verses, which might lead to contradictions under a limited person's knowledge or someone who has limited knowledge on the Quran. And I asked him for the tafsir or the Islamic scholars which justifies his interpretation, which would actually lead towards his position, which is that it is contradictory. He gave no reference whatsoever, no credible sources whatsoever from any Arabic scholars who are knowledgeable on the tafsir and the Quran. And not only did he not do this, but then he dodged my question regarding whether or not the book he's talking about is going to be something which is identical to the Quran. Now, lastly, he tried to play this dishonest Reddit game, but it didn't work because he's an intellectual midget, where he said that it is the case that I said I'm agnostic on there being contradictions without even understanding that the context of this point was me saying I'm agnostic on contradictions as it pertains to the current data that's being brought up in this conversation. But independently of this point, right, it is the case that I'm not agnostic on there being contradictions because of the fact that I believe there's outweighing data which points to the idea that there's no contradiction. Like, for one, the absence of any credible evidence in favor of there being contradictions would be something which is expected under the view that there are no contradictions in the Quran, clearly. So that was my reason, or rather, I didn't present a reason in particular, but that's my reason for there's no contradiction. He misinterpreted that, maybe deliberately or inadvertently as a means of getting some rhetorical points. That's basically my closing statement of these last 2 points, which I think are the most important points of this debate itself. That's it. You can go for it.
All right. Yeah. So to address sort of like the debate that just happened there, what you saw was a display in which Apollo contradicted himself constantly. It makes no wonder why Apollo thinks it is the case the Quran doesn't contain any contradictions, because his statements contain plenty of contradictions. Like, for example, the contradiction that is both the case that he did not say that he was agnostic, and also that he did say that he was agnostic. And also the idea that it's the case that he both believes that the Quran does not contain contradictions, and also he is agnostic on whether or not the Quran contains contradictions. It's kind of silly that he's going with this "you didn't even provide evidence" thing, because that's the English translation. Well, the English translation of what? Of the Arabic Quran. And it's that those translations are done by Islamic scholars. So I am appealing to Islamic scholars, even by your definition. If it's the case you need to appeal to Islamic scholars, I fulfilled that burden too. I just don't care to. I don't care to appeal to Islamic scholars because I don't think they're experts in the subject. I think what they are instead are people giving post hoc justifications of a book filled to the brim with contradictions, written by a man who had sex with a 9-year-old. Nothing about the Quran is something worth following or worth respecting. In the case of the Quran, it contains both the idea that man was created from nothing, and additionally the idea man was created by merely a clot of congealed blood, and additionally the idea that the Quran also says that man was created from dust. All of these things in conjunction cannot possibly be true, let alone two of them being true. So this idea is merely fucking absurd. This idea the Quran does not contain contradictions. It's filled with plenty of them, and there are even more. If somebody looks up contradictions in the Quran, I invite any of the Muslims in here to do that and to take a look. You can say, but is it the case the English translation is even accurate? If it's the case you don't know Arabic, that's a very funny thing to say, because you can't read the original Arabic. So you can just defer to it saying something totally different that would totally justify it. But then at that point, I can do that with literally every verse of the Quran. Every single time that you bring up an English verse for why it's the case that you think that the Quran entails veganism not being true, I can just say, well, that's the English portion. You don't read Arabic, so how do you know? By virtue of the argument that Apollo gave in the conversation, he's implicitly conceded basically every other point that he made. He doesn't really realize it. But on top of this, if it's the case that you ever find yourself in an argument pulling back and forth and being wildly bad faith and trying to change the definitions of words in real time to adjust to whatever you're saying, that's just going to make you look fucking insane. If you do this with things like your agnosticism, if you do this with things like whether or not it's the case that your argument contains, or whether or not the case that your question contains an argument, you are just going to make yourself look straightforwardly fucking insane. This was, just for the record, I understand that the people are probably going to shit talk Apollo after this. Don't do that. If you're a Christian, you have a duty not to. Apollo is made in the image of God just like you. You should be respectful towards him. If you are an atheist, you should have the intellectual integrity to admit that Apollo is pretty good at debate. This just wasn't his best showing. Don't be a fucking disingenuous piece of shit. Don't go attacking him after it. Apollo is not a bad guy. And if there are any Muslims here who think that what Apollo said was correct, that he did well in the argument, I'm open and willing to shit can all of you stupid fucking retards. He's way better at arguing than you, and he lost. You're going to lose way worse. That's the end of my closing statement.
Some people are actually talking about, I mean, someone was saying in the chat, are asking in the chat if me and Sinthe hate each other. We don't need to hate each other.
No, we really fuck with each other. Me and Apollo are like go way back.
Yeah, so
but I would like to talk to you about something else, like outside of hold on, the adjuster.
Go ahead.
You kind of like, but this will be a part of the debate, by the way. But we can just like I guess continue this in the continuation of this debate, because like in perhaps like 15 minutes or 10 minutes, I actually got to go pray, and I'm not even lying.
You said that 15 minutes ago.
If you check, hold on. If you check the Maghrib time in my country, it's like literally time for me to go pray. Like right now, I'm actually at the masjid. But I was just gonna say, if and when we're ready to continue this debate, by the way, it could be later on or tomorrow. There are certain points you mentioned regarding the fact that Arabic scholars is the one who translates the Arabic to the English. That is true, but there's certain flaws with that, which I'll point out in our next conversation. You never brought this up in the debate, so it wouldn't be.
I did actually. You didn't hear me because we were screaming over each other. I did bring it up, but I get that. I get you not hearing it.
Okay, I'll just check the recording to see if you actually said it. Yeah, there's certain words actually, which I'll talk to you about some other time, where it doesn't have like a word in English which is synonymous to it. So it's like you have like placeholder words in English, which is used in the English version of the Quran, which cannot fully represent the meaning and the connotation of the word in Arabic. Several cases. And I can get some sources from Islamic scholars where they actually say that this is true. So that would be a response to what you said regarding that specific claim. If I was to give a response there,